The Great Pyramid of Giza stands silent against the desert sky, its 2 million stone blocks fitting together so precisely you can't slide a credit card between them. No cranes, no lasers, no computers, just human hands and minds working with nothing but raw materials and relentless ingenuity. How did civilizations without blueprints or bulldozers construct monuments that outlast empires? This isn't just a story of ancient engineering, it's a testament to what happens when necessity collides with limitless imagination. From precision-cut stones that defy explanation to aqueducts that still function after 2,000 years, we're about to uncover the hidden brilliance of builders who turned impossibility into legacy. Their secrets weren't lost, they were waiting for us to look closer. Take a moment to picture this Stonehenge's towering slabs, each weighing as much as a school bus, hauled over hundreds of miles without wheels or beasts of burden. Or the Easter Island Moai, those brooding giants carved from volcanic rock, somehow marched across the island to their sacred platforms. The sheer scale of these feats defies logic. Modern engineers scratch their heads at how ancient builders, armed only with stone tools and sheer determination, manipulated megaliths with such exactness. Some suggest log rollers and rope, others propose ingenious leverage systems or even the power of sound vibrations to soften stone. Yet no single theory fully explains the precision cuts, the seamless fits, or the mind-boggling distances these stones traveled. These aren't just rocks, they're puzzles carved by hands that understood forces we're still unraveling. What's even more haunting, the methods might not be lost, just waiting for us to think differently. Perhaps the real secret lies not in the tools they used, but in the way they saw the world itself. Here's your next script segment. Now think about this: the Great Pyramid doesn't just dominate the horizon. It defies time itself with its impossibly precise construction. Modern builders with satellite-guided equipment would struggle to replicate its accuracy, yet the Egyptians aligned its base to true north with an error of just 3/60ths of a degree. To put that in perspective, if you stood at its center and looked toward the sky, the pyramid's orientation would be closer to perfect than the Royal Greenwich Observatory in London, built thousands of years later. How some researchers point to the stars, the ancient Egyptians tracking the circumpolar constellations like never setting sentinels to lock in their alignment. Others believe they used simple yet brilliant leveling tools, flooding trenches with water to create a perfectly flat reference plane. But here's the real mystery: the pyramid's dimensions aren't just random. They encode the golden ratio and even the circumference of the Earth, suggesting a depth of mathematical understanding we're only beginning to appreciate. Could this precision be accidental? Unlikely. The corners form near-perfect right angles, with deviations smaller than the width of a fingernail across football field length sides. That's not guesswork, it's mastery. Perhaps the most humbling thought: they left no manuals, no blueprints, just a monument so exact it whispers across millennia, "We knew more than you think." But let's look beyond the pyramids, because halfway across the ancient world, another civilization was perfecting a material so durable, it puts our modern construction to shame. Picture the Pantheon in Rome, its massive dome stretching upward like the vault of heaven itself. Built around 126 AD, it hasn't just survived 2 millennia of earthquakes, weather, and wars, it's barely aged. Meanwhile, today's concrete bridges and buildings crack and crumble after mere decades. So what made Roman concrete not just endure but actually improve with time? Scientists now know part of the answer: volcanic ash. The Romans mined it from the slopes of Mount Vesuvius, mixing it with lime and seawater to create a chemical reaction that strengthened their structures over centuries. But here's the twist: modern labs can't fully replicate it. Some theories suggest crushed pottery or even animal blood played a role. Others point to the way Romans poured their concrete underwater, allowing minerals to crystallize and lock the material together like a self-healing skeleton. Yet the Pantheon's dome holds an even deeper mystery. Weighing over 4,000 tons, it shouldn't stand without steel reinforcement. But Roman engineers distributed the load so precisely, thinning the walls as they rose, that the dome seems to float on light. No rebar, no modern calculus, just an intuitive grasp of physics we're still decoding. So why did this knowledge vanish? Some say it was lost in the collapse of Rome. Others argue the recipe was never written down, passed only through master builders who took their secrets to the grave. Either way, the lesson is clear. Sometimes the past builds better than we ever could. And if that doesn't make you look at concrete the same way again, well, maybe it's time to ask what other ancient breakthroughs we've forgotten. Now, shift your gaze from towering pyramids and domes to the vast, sun-baked desert of southern Peru. Stretching across nearly 200 square miles, the Nazca Lines sprawl like an ancient artist's canvas, only visible in their full glory from the sky. Gigantic spiders, hummingbirds with wingspans longer than a basketball court, spirals as precise as clockwork, all etched into the earth with such clarity they could have been drawn yesterday. But here's the catch: the Nazca culture created these designs between 500 BC and 500 AD, millennia before human flight. So how did they plot out shapes so large and exact without ever seeing them from above? Some researchers think they used simple but ingenious surveying techniques, staking ropes to the ground and scaling up smaller models, like following a giant connect-the-dots puzzle. Others propose they might have built rudimentary hot air balloons, using fabric and fire to gain a bird's-eye view. There's even a fringe theory suggesting they mapped the lines using reflections in water or polished metals. Yet none of these fully explain how they maintained such flawless proportions across distances that would dwarf modern football fields. But the real twist: the Nazca didn't just scratch the surface, they removed the desert's rust-colored topsoil to reveal lighter sand beneath, creating contrast that's lasted over 2,000 years. Wind and rain should have erased these lines centuries ago, yet they endure, almost as if the desert itself decided to preserve their secrets. What's most haunting isn't just the how, though it's the why. Were they messages to the gods, astronomical calendars, or ritual pathways for ceremonies we'll never witness? We may never know for sure, but one thing's certain: the Nazca Lines are more than just art. They're a challenge from the past, daring us to rethink what ancient people could achieve when they turned the earth itself into their blueprint. And if that doesn't make you wonder what other invisible masterpieces might still be hidden in plain sight, well, maybe we're just not looking from the right angle. High in the mist-shrouded Andes, Machu Picchu clings to its mountain perch with an almost supernatural defiance of physics. While modern cities crumble under earthquakes, these 15th-century walls have shrugged off 5 centuries of tremors without mortar, without steel, without a single crack. The secret lies in stones that look like they've been melted together. The Incas carved granite blocks with such precision that each fits its neighbor like a puzzle piece, locking the entire city into a flexible, living structure. But the real genius isn't just the snugness of the stones, it's the deliberate imperfections. Unlike rigid modern buildings, Incan walls tilt slightly inward, corners curve gently, and doorways fan out in trapezoids. When the ground shakes, these subtle curves let the stones shift and settle back into place, like a dancer adjusting to uneven rhythm. Even the foundations were designed to move. Terraces beneath the city absorb and redirect seismic waves, acting like shock absorbers for the structures above. How did they engineer this without seismographs or stress simulations? Some scholars believe they learned from nature, observing how boulders on mountain slopes weathered quakes, or mimicking the flexibility of reeds in high winds. Others point to trial and error across generations, with each earthquake serving as a brutal but effective teacher. What's undeniable is the result, a city that laughs in the face of disaster. While newer buildings collapse under forces we now measure on the Richter scale, Machu Picchu stands unbroken, a silent challenge from engineers who turned bedrock into poetry. And perhaps that's the most humbling lesson. Sometimes survival isn't about fighting nature's power, but learning to move with it. Now, let's dive into something that shatters every assumption about ancient technology, the Antikythera Mechanism. Found in the wreckage of a Roman-era ship off the coast of Greece, this bronze artifact, no larger than a shoebox, hides a labyrinth of interlocking gears so advanced that historians initially dismissed it as impossible for its time. Carbon dated to around 100 BC, it wasn't just a tool, it was a celestial calculator predicting eclipses, tracking planetary movements, and even marking the dates of the Olympic Games with staggering precision. For context, machines of this complexity didn't reappear until over 1,000 years later, during Europe's clockmaking renaissance. So how did ancient Greeks craft what amounts to a mechanical universe inside a handheld device? The answer lies in its intricate design, 37 meshing bronze gears, some with teeth cut at exact angles to simulate the irregular orbits of the moon and planets. Researchers believe it may have been based on the work of legendary thinkers like Archimedes or Hipparchus, blending astronomy, mathematics, and engineering into a single masterpiece. Yet the real mystery isn't just how it was built, but why such brilliance vanished. Was it a one-off invention lost when its creator died? Or was it part of a wider tradition of ancient tech, most of which sank to the ocean floor or crumbled into dust? Fragments of similar devices have never been found, leaving us to wonder, did the Antikythera Mechanism represent the peak of a forgotten scientific golden age? Here's what's truly humbling. Modern X-ray scans reveal tiny inscriptions on its gears, essentially a user manual etched in Greek. One phrase stands out, pointer to the eclipse. It's a reminder that this wasn't just a gadget for elites. It was a bridge between human curiosity and the cosmos, proof that millennia ago, someone looked at the stars and dared to build a machine to map their dance. And that raises a haunting question. If they could engineer this, what else did they know that we're still uncovering? Perhaps the past isn't just a graveyard of lost ideas, it's a puzzle, waiting for the right moment to reveal its next piece. Beneath the scorching deserts of ancient Persia, a hidden network of veins kept civilizations alive, not with blood but with water. While modern cities drill deep wells and pump resources recklessly, engineers 2,000 years ago crafted the Kanat, an underground river hand-dug through rock and sand, stretching silently for miles without losing a single drop to evaporation. Picture a tunnel as tall as a person, sloped with the precision of a master carpenter's level, carrying cool water from mountain aquifers to arid valleys below. But here's the stroke of genius. Vertical shafts punctured the surface at regular intervals like chimneys for air, maintaining flow and allowing maintenance. Some of these cannot still quench thirst today, their stone channels whispering secrets of sustainability we've only recently begun to relearn. How did they achieve such accuracy without lasers or GPS? Trial and error played a role, but so did observation. Builders hung weighted strings to check gradients, ensuring water moved just fast enough to avoid stagnation or erosion. They mapped terrain by eye, reading the land like a living blueprint, and the result, a single Kanat could irrigate entire orchards for centuries with zero energy input beyond gravity's pull. Compare that to today's electric pumps draining aquifers dry, and you realize this wasn't just engineering. It was a pact with nature, yet Persia wasn't alone in its hydro wisdom. In the jungles of Cambodia, the Khmer Empire built vast barrage reservoirs so massive they doubled as climate regulators, storing monsoon rains to cushion droughts. And in the American Southwest, the ancestral Pueblones carved check dams into canyon walls, coaxing water to linger long enough to nourish crops in stone-lined fields. These weren't just solutions, they were dialogues with the environment, each culture tailoring its answer to the same universal question: how to thrive without plundering the earth. So why does the Kannat outshine them all? Because it turns scarcity into abundance invisibly. No sprawling concrete dams, no toxic runoff, just a hidden harmony between human need and planetary limits. Maybe that's the most urgent lesson buried in these tunnels. Sustainability isn't about inventing new tech, but rediscovering the old wisdom that already solved the problem. And if we're brave enough to listen, the past might just guide us back to balance. The legend of the Hanging Gardens of Babylon paints a picture so vivid, it's hard to believe it might never have existed. Ancient texts describe a towering oasis, lush terraces dripping with vines and flowers, rising above the arid Mesopotamian plains like a mirage. King Nebuchadnezzar II supposedly built it for his homesick queen, a mountain of greenery to remind her of her verdant homeland. But here's the twist: not a single shred of physical evidence has ever been found in Babylon's ruins. No carvings, no irrigation channels, no traces of the legendary gardens. So were they a poetic exaggeration, a case of mistaken identity? Or did engineers pull off a horticultural miracle so advanced even its remnants elude us? If the gardens were real, the logistics alone boggle the mind. Babylon sat in what's now modern-day Iraq, a land of blistering heat and scarce rainfall. Keeping terraced plants alive would have required thousands of gallons of water daily, hauled uphill against gravity's pull. Some historians point to the shaduf, a hand-operated lever and bucket system still used along the Nile. Others argue for Archimedes' screw, except this device appeared centuries after Nebuchadnezzar's reign. The most compelling theory, a hidden network of reed pipes and helical pumps, drawing water from the Euphrates River and funneling it through the garden's walls like a primitive but effective plumbing system. Yet the mystery deepens when you consider the gardens might not have been in Babylon at all. Recent excavations near Nineveh suggest Assyrian King Sennacherib could have been the true architect, with ancient tablets describing his palace without rival, crowned by irrigated terraces. The confusion might stem from Babylon's fame overshadowing neighboring achievements, or from generations of storytellers blurring fact into legend. What's fascinating isn't just the question of where or if the gardens existed, but why the idea captivates us so deeply. Perhaps because they represent the ultimate marriage of human ambition and nature's defiance. Even as a myth, the Hanging Gardens challenge us to wonder, if ancient engineers could dream this boldly, what else might they have accomplished that we've yet to uncover? And that's the real intrigue, not just solving the puzzle, but embracing the possibility that some wonders live forever precisely because they hover between memory and imagination. Long before the pyramids pierced the skyline of Egypt, before even the first seeds of agriculture took root, an astonishing complex rose from the hills of southeastern Turkey. Göbekli Tepe, a maze of towering limestone pillars arranged in concentric circles, wasn't built by farmers or kings. It was crafted by hunter-gatherers over 11,000 years ago, a time when textbooks claim humans were still chasing their next meal with stone-tipped spears. Yet here, in this sacred space, they lifted monolithic slabs twice the weight of a modern elephant, carving them with intricate reliefs of scorpions, lions, and vultures so detailed they seemed to writhe in the torchlight. How? That's the question shaking archaeology to its core. These builders had no metal chisels, no wheels, no domesticated animals to haul their materials. Just flint tools and sheer manpower. Some researchers suggest they used ropes woven from wild grasses, along with log sledges and earthen ramps to drag the stones from nearby quarries. Others propose they might have softened the limestone with fire and water, chiseling while the rock was still pliable. But even these theories don't fully explain the precision of the T-shaped pillars, their edges sharp enough to cast shadows like modern steel girders. What's truly revolutionary isn't just the how, though, it's the why. Göbekli Tepe turns history on its head. For decades, we believed complex societies emerged after agriculture, when surplus food allowed specialization. Yet here's evidence of a monumental temple built by nomadic people, suggesting something profound. Perhaps it wasn't farming that drove civilization forward, but communal ritual. The carvings, a menagerie of predators and symbols, hint at a spiritual purpose, a place where clans gathered to worship forces they couldn't yet name. And then, around 8000 BC, they buried it deliberately, filling the circles with rubble as if sealing away a secret. Was it a farewell to an old worldview? A precaution against something forgotten? We may never know. But one thing's certain, Göbekli Tepe isn't just a ruin. It's a provocation, daring us to rewrite the story of human ingenuity. If hunter-gatherers could engineer this, what other chapters of our past are still waiting to be uncovered? The answer might lie not in what we've found, but in what we've yet to recognize. Imagine a civilization that ran an empire spanning thousands of miles without a single written word. No scrolls, no carved tablets, no ink on parchment. Instead, the Incas wrote their history, tracked their taxes, and even told their stories using nothing but strings and knots. These weren't just simple counting tools. They were quipus, intricate rope-based records that might hold secrets we're only beginning to unravel. At first glance, a quipu looks like a collection of colorful cords dangling from a main string. But peer closer and you'll find a sophisticated system. Knots tied at precise intervals, threads spun in distinct directions, even dyes that might have signaled meaning beyond numbers. While Spanish conquistadors dismissed them as primitive tally sticks, modern researchers now suspect quipus were far more. A three-dimensional binary code capable of encoding everything from census data to epic poetry. How did it work? Think of each knot as a digit in a complex equation. The position, type, and sequence of knots could represent quantities, units, tens, hundreds, akin to an ancient spreadsheet. But here's where it gets fascinating. Some quipus don't follow numerical patterns at all. Their knots cluster in ways that suggest names, places, or even narratives, like a tactile storytelling medium. Recent studies using algorithms have identified repeating structures that hint at grammatical rules, as if the strings were sentences waiting to be read. Yet the Spanish never cracked the code. Why? Partly because they destroyed thousands of quipus, branding them as pagan artifacts, but also because the system was too alien to their pen and paper mindset. Unlike alphabets carved in stone, quipus required touch, memory, and spatial reasoning, a language woven into fiber rather than etched onto surfaces. Some scholars argue they were designed to be felt, not seen, with trained interpreters running their fingers along the chords like reading Braille. What's most astonishing isn't just the complexity, though. It's the efficiency. The Inca Empire, larger than Rome at its peak, used quipus to manage everything from grain stores to troop movements across the Andes. No delays, no lost paperwork, just a portable, durable system that worked as well in a dusty warehouse as it did on a mountain pass. So why haven't we fully decoded them? Because quipus weren't just records, they were performances. Without living quipucamayos, the keepers of the chords, we're left with half the puzzle. But each new discovery, like the recent find of quipus buried with narrative accounts in Spanish, brings us closer to hearing these knotted whispers of the past. And that raises a tantalizing thought. What if the real breakthrough isn't just translating the knots, but learning to think in strings and loops? After all, the Incas didn't just invent a tool. They reimagined language itself. While we often think of electricity as a modern discovery, nestled in the dusty archives of Baghdad's National Museum sits an object that defies that assumption, a humble clay jar no taller than your forearm. But inside, something extraordinary hides, a copper cylinder wrapped around an iron rod sealed with asphalt. Found in the ruins of a 2,000-year-old Parthian village, this so-called Baghdad Battery looks like something ripped from a school science project. Yet if researchers are right, it might rewrite the timeline of human innovation. So how would it work? Fill the jar with an acidic liquid vinegar or citrus juice would do, and the iron and copper react, creating a small electrical charge. Connect multiple jars, and suddenly you've got enough voltage to electroplate gold onto silver. Archaeologists confirmed this by building replicas, producing up to 2 volts of electricity. That's not enough to power a light bulb, but for gilding jewelry or religious artifacts, it's eerily plausible. But here's where the debate ignites. No wires or electrodes were found nearby, and the asphalt seal suggests the jars might have held scrolls instead of electrolytes. Skeptics argue they could have been simple storage containers with the metal parts coincidentally aligned. Yet ancient Mesopotamians were master metallurgists famed for their gold-plated objects. Could electroplating have been their secret? The mystery deepens when you consider the context. Around the same time, Egyptian reliefs show what look like giant light bulbs in temple crypts. Were these symbolic or clues to lost tech? And in China, texts mention glowing pearls that illuminated palaces. Coincidence or fragments of a forgotten understanding? What's undeniable is this: whether ritual object or rudimentary battery, the Baghdad Battery challenges our arrogance about ancient ingenuity. Maybe they didn't need grids or generators. Maybe they found ways to harness nature's whispers long before we thought possible. And if that's true, how many other, ordinary artifacts in museums are quietly hiding extraordinary secrets? The answer might depend on how willing we are to rethink the past, not as primitive, but as profoundly inventive. The sprawling ruins of Teotihuacan rise from the Mexican highlands like a ghostly blueprint of a forgotten civilization's mind. Unlike the haphazard growth of most ancient cities, every street and structure here obeys a meticulous grid, not just aligned to the land, but to the cosmos itself. The Avenue of the Dead, the city's central artery, runs exactly 15.5 degrees east of true north, pointing toward the setting of the Pleiades star cluster on key festival dates. The Pyramid of the Sun, a behemoth of compacted earth and stone, mirrors the sacred mountain behind it, while the Pyramid of the Moon completes a celestial triad with its lunar symbolism. This isn't just urban planning, it's architecture as astronomy. Yet the most baffling part, the builders left no inscriptions, no royal tombs, not even a name for their city. Later Aztecs dubbed it Teotihuacan, the place where gods were created, because they couldn't fathom mortals designing such perfection. Modern laser surveys reveal even the sewage system followed sacred geometry, with drains engineered to align with solstice sunbeams. Some scholars believe the entire layout mirrors the Mesoamerican cosmos, pyramids as portals between worlds, plazas as gathering points for rituals we'll never witness. But then, around 550 AD, the impossible happened. A metropolis housing over 100,000 people, Rome's equal in scale and sophistication, was abandoned. No invasion, no natural disaster, no clear collapse, just silence. Archaeologists find smashed statues and sealed doorways, as if the city was ritually closed by its own inhabitants. Were they fleeing drought, revolt, or something more profound? A decision to vanish before their knowledge could be corrupted. Here's what lingers: Teotihuacan's influence outlasted its builders. Maya elites copied its art styles, Aztec emperors pilgrimaged to its ruins. Perhaps the real lesson isn't in the mystery of their disappearance, but in the boldness of their vision. They didn't just build a city, they etched their understanding of the universe into stone, daring us to decipher it one aligned pyramid at a time. And standing there today, tracing shadows that still mark equinoxes with knife-edge precision, you realize some blueprints don't need words. They speak in sunlight and stone. The Byzantine Empire had its own version of a flamethrower, one so terrifying, enemies believed it was a gift from the devil himself. Picture this: Arab fleets sailing toward Constantinople, confident in their overwhelming numbers, when suddenly, jets of liquid fire erupt from Byzantine ships. The flames cling to the water, consuming wood and flesh alike, unable to be doused even by waves. This was Greek fire, a weapon so devastating it helped shield an empire for over 7 centuries. What made it unlike any other incendiary weapon of its time? Most ancient fire attacks relied on simple burning arrows or pots of oil. But Greek fire wasn't just fire, it was a chemical nightmare. Historical accounts describe it as sticky, self-igniting, and capable of burning even on wet surfaces. Scholars suspect a volatile mix of naphtha, a crude form of petroleum, and quicklime, which reacts violently with water, generating intense heat. Some theories propose secret additives like pine resin or sulfur to enhance its adhesive and toxic properties. Yet no surviving recipe matches the horror described by those who witnessed its wrath. The true genius, though, lay in its delivery. Byzantine engineers designed pressurized siphons, often mounted on ships or city walls, spraying the liquid in a continuous stream like an ancient flamethrower. Some versions could even be hurled in clay grenades or pumped through tubes with bellows. The effect was psychological as much as physical. Enemy ships would scatter at the mere sight of the infamous fire-bearing ships prowling the harbor. But here's the twist: the secret was so closely guarded that only a handful of families in Constantinople knew the formula. Emperors reportedly kept it locked away like state treasure, with leaks punishable by death. When an ally once requested the recipe, the Byzantine response was chilling. Such things are revealed to no one, they must remain, as commanded by our ancestors, immovably secure. So why did the knowledge vanish? Some blame the fall of Constantinople in 1453, when the last keepers of the secret may have perished. Others speculate the formula was deliberately lost to prevent misuse. Either way, Greek fire stands as a haunting reminder, not just of ancient ingenuity, but of how fiercely civilizations could protect their technological edge. And that leaves us with an unsettling thought. What other breakthroughs from the past slipped through history's fingers because someone decided silence was the ultimate safeguard? Beneath the rolling hills of China's Zhejiang province lies an underground enigma that defies both time and logic: the Longyu Caves. 24 caverns, each painstakingly carved from sandstone more than 2 millennia ago, stretch across an area equivalent to 30 football fields. But what's truly staggering isn't just their sheer size, it's the precision. Every wall and pillar is sculpted with near-identical angles, their surfaces adorned with chiseled lines so uniform they look machine-made. No mortar, no scaffolding, no blueprints, just a labyrinth of spaces so perfectly engineered, even modern laser scans struggle to find flaws. Now consider this: the amount of stone removed here rivals the entirety of the Great Pyramid, over 900,000 cubic feet. Yet not a single fragment has ever been found nearby. Where did it all go? Historians have scoured ancient texts and local legends, but the caves vanish from the record as if they were never dug. No emperor boasts of their construction, no poet sings of their grandeur, no map marks their existence. It's as if the workers vanished into the shadows along with the rubble. So how did they do it? The chisel marks suggest a methodical approach, teams working in shifts, perhaps by lamplight, following a master template we can't decipher. Some theorize they used water erosion to soften the rock, carving along natural fault lines. Others point to the cave's resonant acoustics, speculating that sound vibrations guided their symmetry. But here's the real stumper. The walls slope at exact 75-degree angles, a deliberate choice that prevents collapse while creating an eerie sense of order. Modern engineers confirm this isn't luck, it's advanced structural math applied centuries before the formulas were supposedly invented. And then there are the marking swirling patterns that ripple across ceilings like frozen waves. Are they ritual symbols, celestial maps, or simply the signature of artisans who refused anonymity? Local villagers whisper that the caves were already ancient when their ancestors first stumbled upon them in the 13th century, submerged in murky water until pumped dry. Could they be far older than we think? One thing's certain, the Longyu Caves weren't dug on a whim. The labor required would have mobilized thousands, yet no tools, no worker graves, no traces of a supporting civilization have surfaced. Maybe that's the point. Unlike pyramids or temples built to proclaim power, these caves seem designed to conceal their purpose locked in the silence of stone. Standing in their echoing chambers, you're left with a humbling thought. Some ancient wonders weren't meant to be understood. They were meant to endure as questions, challenging us to reconsider what's possible when human ambition meets the Earth's bones. And perhaps that's the most profound legacy of all, not the answers we find, but the mysteries we're wise enough to preserve. Carved from a single block of red granite, Egyptian obelisks pierce the sky like frozen sunbeams, monuments so massive, their very existence defies logic. Picture a stone skyscraper taller than a 7-story building, weighing as much as 75 elephants, yet shaped with such precision that modern engineers still debate how they pulled it off. These weren't just decorative pillars, they were sacred lightning rods of divine energy, their pyramidal tips sheathed in electrum to catch the first and last light of the sun. The journey from quarry to throne began in Aswan, where workers chiseled directly into bedrock, carving out obelisks with nothing but dolomite hammers and copper chisels. One misstep could fracture the stone, wasting years of labor, but the real puzzle, transporting these behemoths hundreds of miles down the Nile without cracking them. Ancient reliefs hint at sledges gliding over mud-slicked paths, but recent experiments suggest a cleverer trick: wet sand. Pour water between the sledge and ground and friction plummets. A team of just 60 could then haul an obelisk at walking speed. Yet the climax of the drama was Erection Day. With no cranes or hydraulics, engineers likely used a combination of ramps, pivots, and counterweights, inching the monolith upright like a slow-motion ballet. The margin for error almost zero, the unfinished obelisk still lying in Aswan's quarry, cracked during carving, stands as a silent witness to the stakes. But here's what's truly staggering. These stones weren't just lifted, they were aimed. The base of Rome's Lateran obelisk, for example, fits its pedestal with a tolerance thinner than a coin. That's not brute force, it's a masterclass in geometry and patience. Modern laser surveys reveal some were placed with astronomical alignments, their shadows serving as giant sundials for rituals we can only reconstruct. What's humbling isn't just the scale of achievement, but the absence of boasting. No ancient manual survives to explain these feats, just the obelisks themselves, silent, unyielding, and utterly indifferent to our disbelief. They don't ask to be understood, they simply stand as proof that limits are often illusions, waiting for the right minds to dissolve them. And perhaps that's the most enduring lesson. In an age of steel and silicon, these stone giants remind us that ingenuity doesn't need modern tools, just relentless curiosity and the courage to try the impossible. Now let's set sail across the vast blue expanse of the Pacific, where horizons stretch endlessly and tiny islands vanish like specks of dust in an ocean of water. This wasn't just open water to the Polynesians. It was a well-mapped highway, read not with compasses or charts, but with the language of nature itself. While European explorers clung to coastlines, fearing they'd plunge off the edge of the world, Polynesian voyagers were already mastering journeys of thousands of miles, guided by stars that whispered directions and waves that carried hidden signatures of distant land. Their vessels, called Waikolua, were engineering marvels, twin-hulled canoes lashed together with woven fiber, their sails catching winds that propelled families, crops, even livestock toward horizons unseen. No nails, no blueprints, just an intimate understanding of materials. Hulls were hollowed from colossal breadfruit trees using stone adzes, while sails were woven from pandanus leaves, flexible enough to harness gusts yet sturdy enough to outrun storms. These weren't just boats, they were floating ecosystems carrying everything needed to colonize new worlds. But the real genius lay in navigation. Imagine memorizing the night sky so thoroughly you could detect shifts in star paths imperceptible to untrained eyes. Polynesian navigators, or wayfinders, did just that, using the rising and setting of key stars as celestial signposts, yet stars alone weren't enough. They read ocean swells like fingerprints, sensing disruptions caused by distant islands. They tracked the flight patterns of seabirds, which reliably pointed toward land after feeding. Even the color of clouds held clues, tinted green by reflections of lagoons over the horizon. Why did European explorers like Captain Cook initially dismiss these feats? Arrogance played a role, the idea that primitive cultures couldn't outpace their own technology. But also, Polynesian knowledge was oral, passed down through chants and apprenticeships, invisible to outsiders who relied on written logs. When Cook's Tahitian guide, Tupaia, mapped over 100 islands from memory, Europeans were stunned. His mental atlas spanned an area larger than North America, yet it had no paper counterpart. The tragedy: much of this wisdom nearly vanished under colonial pressure, as Western ships replaced voyaging canoes and star lore faded. But today, a revival is underway. Modern Hawaiians and Maori are rebuilding double-hulled vessels, sailing ancient routes using recovered techniques. Their success isn't just a tribute to the past, it's proof that some of humanity's greatest adventures weren't powered by engines, but by observation, courage, and trust in nature's subtle cues. Perhaps that's the most humbling lesson. While we've invented satellites and GPS, we're still relearning what it means to truly see the world around us. The Polynesians didn't conquer the Pacific, they conversed with it, a dialogue written in wind, waves, and wings, and that conversation, it's far from over. Deep in the steamy jungles of Veracruz, Mexico, the Olmec civilization left behind a gallery of giant stone faces gazing across centuries with an air of quiet defiance. These colossal heads, each carved from a single basalt boulder heavier than 3 elephants, aren't just sculptures. They're portraits, individuals frozen in time, crowned with intricate helmets that hint at a story we're still piecing together. What's staggering isn't just the artistry, but the logistics. The Olmecs quarried these monoliths from the Tuxtla Mountains, dragging them over 50 miles through swamps and uneven terrain, all without wheels, pulleys, or even beasts of burden. How? Archaeologists suspect a combination of brute strength and clever physics. They likely used rope woven from agave fibers along with log rollers to inch the stones forward. But some theories go further. Perhaps they leveraged the region's seasonal floods, floating the boulders on rafts during wet months. Either way, the effort speaks volumes. Transporting a single head could have taken hundreds of workers' months of backbreaking labor. Yet the real mystery lies in the why. These weren't monuments to gods or kings in the traditional sense. Each head bears unique facial features, full lips, broad noses, even distinct headgear suggesting they represented real people. Were they rulers, warriors? Revered ancestors, the helmets, some resembling athletic gear, fuel speculation about ritual ball games or sacred combat. But with no accompanying inscriptions, their identities remain tantalizingly out of reach. Equally puzzling are the tools. Basalt is brutally hard, yet the Olmecs shaped it with stunning precision using nothing but harder stones like jadate and water abrasion. Grooves on unfinished heads reveal their process, pecking away the surface with hammerstones, then polishing with sand until the features emerged like ghosts from the rock. What's haunting is the absence of vanity. Unlike later civilizations that built pyramids to proclaim their power, the Olmecs invested their greatest labor in these silent sentinels, faces without names, meant to outlast memory itself. Maybe that's the point. They weren't celebrating conquest or divinity, but something far more human, the individuals who shaped their world. And standing before these weathered visages today, you realize the Olmecs didn't just carve stone. They carved questions, daring us to wonder who they really were. While ancient Rome often steals the spotlight for its aqueducts and baths, a far older civilization had already mastered the art of urban hygiene with jaw-dropping sophistication. Step into the streets of Mohenjo-Daro around 2500 BC, and you'd find a city where clean water flowed and waste vanished with a level of efficiency some modern neighborhoods still struggle to match. Each house in this Indus Valley metropolis had something revolutionary: private bathrooms, not just holes in the ground, but carefully constructed brick latrines on the upper floors, connected to a citywide network of covered drains made from precisely fitted bricks and sealed with tar to prevent leaks. These weren't crude ditches, they sloped at calculated angles to let gravity carry waste away from homes, channeling it through underground conduits to designated disposal pits outside the city walls. Even rainfall was managed with purpose. Streets were laid out in grids with subtle cambers, directing stormwater into roadside drains to prevent flooding. What's striking isn't just the technology, but the mindset behind it. Unlike contemporaries who focused on temples or palaces, Mohenjo-Daro's planners prioritized public health with almost modern foresight. Communal wells dotted every neighborhood, their cylindrical brick linings preventing contamination, while wastewater systems kept filth separate from drinking sources, a concept hygiene-conscious Europeans wouldn't systematize for another 4,000 years. Archaeologists have found no evidence of ruling elites or grand monuments, suggesting this wasn't a top-down mandate but a shared civic value. So why did such brilliance vanish? Climate shifts likely played a role, droughts strangling the lifeblood rivers that sustained the cities. But there's a deeper irony here. Later civilizations, from Rome to Victorian London, would endure plagues from poor sanitation while reinventing solutions the Indus Valley had already perfected. Perhaps their greatest oversight wasn't engineering but documentation. They left no instruction manuals, only silent bricks waiting for us to recognize their genius. Standing in the ruins today, you can still trace the fingerprints of their pragmatism in every drain cover and well curb. They didn't just build a city, they crafted a blueprint for living well together, one we're still catching up to. High above the modern city of Cusco, the zigzagging ramparts of Sacsayhuaman slice through the Andes like a stone serpent frozen mid-motion. These aren't ordinary walls, they're a masterclass in anti-earthquake engineering, built to withstand the violent tremors that regularly shake the region. What's astonishing isn't just their resilience, but the surreal precision of their assembly. Giant blocks, some weighing over 100 tons, fit together so seamlessly you couldn't slip a razor blade between them. And here's the kicker: the Inca built this fortress without mortar, without wheels, and without any metal tools harder than bronze. The secret lies in the masonry style known as ashlar, a technique where irregular polygonal stones are shaped to interlock like a three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle. But calling it a puzzle undersells the genius. Each block was painstakingly pecked into shape using handheld stones, then trial fitted against its neighbors until the contact surfaces matched perfectly. The result, walls that flex during quakes, dispersing energy instead of cracking. Modern engineers call this dry stone construction, but the Inca elevated it to an art form with angles so precise they resemble fractal geometry. Now, here's where theories diverge. Some researchers argue the Inca must have known something we don't, perhaps a way to temporarily soften the andesite rock using plant acids or mineral pastes, allowing them to mold it like clay before it hardened again. Local legends speak of a liquid that eats stone, and colonial accounts mention a lost recipe involving herbs and fermented juices, yet no archaeological evidence of such a substance has ever been found. Others propose a simpler but no less impressive explanation: generations of artisans honing their craft through relentless experimentation, passing down tactile knowledge that machines still can't replicate. What's haunting is the imperfection. Unlike the cold uniformity of modern concrete, these walls celebrate asymmetry, no two blocks alike, yet each contributing to an unshakable whole. The Inca didn't just build structures, they collaborated with geology itself, letting the stones dictate their own fit. Standing in the shadow of these walls today, you're left with a humbling realization. Perhaps the real innovation wasn't the technique, but the patience behind it. In a world obsessed with speed, Sacsayhuaman whispers that some things can't and shouldn't be rushed. The proof: 5 centuries of earthquakes haven't shifted a single stone. Meanwhile, our steel and glass towers rely on computer models just to stay upright. The difference isn't just technology, it's reverence. Buried beneath the shifting sands of China's Taklamakan Desert lies a mystery that rewrites the story of the ancient world: the Tarim Mummies. These aren't just preserved bodies, they're time capsules from a forgotten chapter of history. With their striking European features, woven woolen textiles dyed in vivid crimsons and blues, and felted boots lined with intricate patterns, they look like they wandered straight out of the Eurasian steppe. Yet here they rest, thousands of miles east of where conventional history says they belonged, in what's now the Xinjiang region of China. What's astonishing isn't just their appearance, it's the how and the why. The mummies, some dating back 4,000 years, were preserved not through artificial embalming, but by the desert itself. The Taklamakan's hyper-arid climate and saline soil acted like a natural freezer, halting decay so effectively that even their eyelashes and tattoos remain intact. But here's the twist: their graves reveal deliberate care. Felt mats line the burial pits, bodies were placed in boat-shaped coffins, a practice more common in Scandinavia than Central Asia, and some were even buried with small pouches of ephedra, a stimulant linked to early Indo-European rituals. This wasn't haphazard preservation, it was a cultural statement frozen in time. Now, the real puzzle: how did people with distinctly Caucasian features end up here, centuries before the Silk Road officially connected East and West? Genetic studies confirm their ancestry traces back to the Yamnaya, Bronze Age herders from the Black Sea region. But their clothing tells another story: woven techniques resembling those of Celtic tribes, yet dyed with pigments found in Chinese lacquerware. Were they traders bridging continents, migrants who carried their traditions into uncharted lands, or evidence of a lost network of exchange that predates recorded history? The silence of the historical record is deafening. Later Chinese texts mention fair-haired peoples in the region, but the Tarim mummies vanish from collective memory, their legacy buried under layers of sand and time. Perhaps their greatest lesson isn't just about migration, it's about the fragility of human connection. Cultures we assume were isolated were, in fact, trading ideas, textiles, and technologies across dizzying distances, only for those threads to fray and fade. Standing before these mummies today, their faces eerily lifelike, you realize history isn't a straight line. It's a tapestry, and we're still finding the missing stitches. Ancient mining techniques, the underground feats that defied limitations beneath the surface of our planet. Hidden from the sun's reach, ancient miners carved labyrinths that rival modern engineering. In the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, prehistoric copper pits stretched deep into the earth, tunnels where laborers extracted pure metal over 7,000 years ago using nothing but fire and stone. Meanwhile, in the deserts of Nubia, gold miners followed quartz veins hundreds of feet underground, leaving behind shafts so vast they could swallow entire buildings. The question isn't just how they dug so deep, it's how they survived down there without the technology we take for granted. Take fire setting, one of the most ingenious methods in their arsenal. Miners would heat rock faces with roaring fires, then douse them with cold water, causing the stone to fracture. It was a brutal but effective process, allowing them to pry loose ore with stone hammers and antler picks. The noise, smoke, and heat must have been unbearable, yet they persisted, generation after generation, driven by necessity and ambition. But digging was only half the battle. Ventilating these suffocating tunnels was a life or death puzzle. Some cultures, like the Romans, built dual shafts to create natural airflow, while others used reed pipes or even fanning systems with animal hides to push fresh air deeper. In the Great Orme mines of Wales, archaeologists found evidence of chimneys carved into the walls, funneling smoke upward while allowing breathable air to circulate. Then there's the matter of structural integrity. No steel beams, no concrete, just wooden supports, stacked stones, and careful geometry. The Egyptians employed timber cribbing in their turquoise mines, while Bronze Age Europeans reinforced tunnels with woven branches. The real marvel, some of these ancient frameworks still hold up today, defying gravity and time with nothing but raw craftsmanship. What's most striking isn't the technology, though, it's the sheer audacity. These miners descended into darkness with flickering torches, trusting their instincts and collective knowledge. They mapped veins by touch, followed mineral stains like breadcrumbs, and turned rock into wealth with patience that would dwarf our modern rush for resources. Perhaps that's the real lesson hidden in these tunnels. In an age before blueprints and safety regulations, they didn't just extract metals, they mastered the earth itself, one strike at a time. And if you listen closely in the silence of those abandoned shafts, you can almost hear the echoes of their hammers still chipping away at our understanding of the past. Deep within the temple of Hathor at Dendera, a peculiar carving casts an eerie glow across centuries of debate. Etched into the stone, a bulb-like shape cradles a winding serpent, stretching toward what appears to be a socket, a scene so strikingly similar to a modern light bulb that it sparked theories of ancient electrical knowledge. Known as the Dendera Light, this enigmatic relief has become a lightning rod for controversy, dividing scholars and enthusiasts alike. Mainstream Egyptologists offer a symbolic interpretation. The bulb represents a lotus flower, the serpent a manifestation of the god Harsomptus, and the entire tableau a spiritual allegory for creation myths. The surrounding carvings, they note, depict other ritual imagery, priests holding ceremonial objects, celestial boats, and divine offerings, all consistent with traditional temple iconography. Yet the precision of the design keeps alternative theories alive. The bulb's glass-like enclosure, the snake's coiled filament, the apparent cable trailing to a box, could these details really be purely metaphorical? Some researchers point to the Baghdad Battery as potential corroboration, suggesting ancient cultures might have harnessed electricity in ways we've yet to fully understand. Others counter that pareidolia, the human tendency to see familiar patterns, is at play, projecting modern technology onto sacred art. What's fascinating isn't just the carving itself, but what it reveals about our relationship with history. The Dendera Light debate mirrors a deeper tension. Our desire to find lost genius in the past versus the need to ground interpretations in evidence. Every generation sees ancient artifacts through the lens of its own technology. Victorian scholars imagined steam-powered wonders, while today's viewers spot electrical schematics. Perhaps the truth lies somewhere between. Even if the carving isn't a literal light bulb, its existence challenges us to ask, why does it feel so eerily ahead of its time? Whether a case of artistic coincidence or a whisper of forgotten innovation, the Dendera Light refuses to fade into obscurity. And in that stubborn brilliance, it accomplishes something remarkable. It keeps us looking closer, questioning deeper, and marveling at the blurred line between myth and possibility. After all, the most enduring mysteries aren't just about uncovering answers. They're about remembering how much we still have left to discover. Standing at the crossroads of past and present, these ancient marvels don't just belong to history, they challenge it. Every perfectly fitted stone, every star-aligned temple, every machine carved from bronze whispers the same unsettling question: what if we've underestimated our ancestors? Modern textbooks often paint these feats as primitive miracles, but the evidence tells a different story. This wasn't just trial and error. It was applied physics, celestial mathematics, and environmental mastery on a scale that still leaves engineers speechless. Consider the common thread running through these wonders: resourcefulness. No steel, they shaped granite with quartz and patience. No GPS, they mapped continents using waves and stars. No computers, they encoded data in knotted cords and gearwork. Their brilliance didn't stem from superior technology, but from something we risk losing in our digital age: relentless observation. They studied the world until it became a blueprint, turning limitations into advantages. Yet the most humbling realization isn't just what they built, it's what they chose not to leave behind. The Incas' quipu cords, the Roman concrete recipe, the secret of Greek fire, these weren't lost by accident. Some knowledge was guarded like gold, shared only through apprenticeships or ritual. Other techniques may have vanished with cultures crushed by time or conquest, but here's the twist: their silence isn't a dead end, it's an invitation. Every unanswered question is a spark for the next generation of explorers, scientists, and dreamers. So where does this leave us with more than just admiration? These engineers weren't magicians, they were problem solvers who refused to accept impossible. Their legacy isn't locked in ruins, it's a living challenge to look beyond textbooks, to question assumptions, and to remember that human ingenuity doesn't evolve in a straight line. Sometimes it leaps sideways or even backward, revealing that progress isn't about the tools you hold, but the vision you cultivate. Now it's your turn. Which ancient mystery keeps you up at night? The precision of the pyramids, the eerie genius of Antikythera, or something deeper? The untold stories still buried beneath desert sands and ocean floors. Drop your thoughts below and let's keep the conversation alive. And if you're hungry for more deep dives into history's hidden chapters, hit subscribe. The past has only begun to share its